You are listening to ESL Talk, a podcast made for English teachers by English teachers. Here are your hosts, Daniel and Golnaz.
Hi everyone, we are here for another episode of ESL Talk. Welcome.
Today, we want to look at some cultural issues or barriers that teachers experience at work, and we want to share some tips on how we can overcome them.
Our guest this week on the episode is Euclide. He's a teacher, English teacher, ESL professor at a university in South Korea. And we'll be having a chat with him today about his experiences, his upbringing, and how he overcame cultural barriers living and working in a very different country to where he came from, which is the USA.
And we want to take a look at different, let's say, situations or factors that kind of cause these cultural issues or barriers for teachers. First of all, we want to take a look at teaching students from different countries and different backgrounds and religions. And Daniel, would you want to share what happens and any experiences that you have had in the UK or Korea, Canada?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, cultural issues and cultural barriers are something that probably, native and non-native teachers will face. Perhaps non-native teachers are going to experience this more, unfortunately. But I can definitely talk a little bit about the experiences that I've had. When I was working in the UK, a lot of the cultural issues and barriers for me as a teacher came from religion. The students that I taught came from very diverse backgrounds. I guess it was a blessing in a way that I got to work with students from lots of different countries who spoke lots of different languages, who had many different religions, and they were all together in one place. So it did bring its challenges because I need to learn how to communicate with those students effectively. I need to learn how to understand their needs and maybe understand how best they learn and what's acceptable and what isn't acceptable as well. So I would say that those are some issues and barriers for me as a teacher. In Korea, again, culture very different in terms of, how rare foreigners are. So if you're a foreigner in Korea, you're very, very much in the 1%. People tend to ask you some strange questions. They might stare at you, or they might, want to kind of know a lot of personal information about you. Again, this isn't a race thing. It's more a case of just curiosity and not knowing. But it can sometimes be a little bit frustrating, and it can be an issue as a teacher because students might be more interested in your personal life than your professional life. So that definitely brought some issues when I was in Korea. And as for Canada, Canada is a really diverse place. It's a melting pot of religions, languages, nationalities, cultures, languages. So I wouldn't say I experienced too many cultural issues and barriers here. Being from the UK, I'm very, very fortunate to know that things are quite similar. So I think the experience here hasn't been too different to the UK, but definitely I've managed to meet people from different countries, and I've managed to have a lot of students from new countries as well. And that just builds to my teaching experience and kind of, allows me to develop new ways to work with those students, help those students, and find out how they learn best and how they learn English best, which can be different, but definitely trying to turn those issues and barriers into positives and into benefits. How about for you, Golnaz? Would you care to share your experience as a non-native teacher?
Well, as a non-native teacher working in Iran, for me, there were no issues regarding cultural or, background differences because, we all were Iranians coming from the same country and same, let's say, similar background. But working in Iran, there are some other problems or issues that you might face as a woman and as a teacher. Those go back to because in Iran, it is one country, but it is made up of very different cultures and backgrounds coming all from all areas of the country. And then as a teacher, you have all of those people in one classroom with different styles, different ways of thinking, different approaches to learning. I did not have a big challenge with this, but what helped me during those years was, being open and being respectful to everyone with any belief, with any background, with any religion, and kind of, setting them aside just out the door. And when you enter the classroom, the atmosphere that we shared was kind of an environment that people are there to work with English. Our main major was English, nothing else. So where you come from, what your background is respected, but is not going to be an issue. That was something easy to handle for me in Iran. In Turkey, it was a little bit different because, well, first of all, there is this bias that, the students or the schools think like, okay, you are not native. This is like something that comes to their mind. And there is this demand and there is this expectation for students that they want to see a native teacher, and they prefer native teachers sometimes. But again, I was so lucky to be able to create this, let's say, good rapport with my students and doing my work, doing my best actually, and delivering good lessons to them, that I, again, did not face any issues with my students. I was never judged by them. I was never, disrespected by them. I was always loved by them, always respected by them, regardless of my background, regardless of my, actually me being a non-native. And it was actually kind of interesting and kind of surprising for them, because they were like, what are you doing here? You're from Iran and then you're teaching English in Turkey. Why? So they were kind of curious to learn more about me and about my, my passion, my interest and everything. And once they started to learn more about me and what my plans are and why I am there, no, they kind of appreciate it. So I think for me, it has never been a big issue with my students, but I have had my own challenges with some schools when I, went to some job interviews. I heard this, they told me that you are not a native teacher, so we are sorry, we cannot hire you. I heard this a lot.
That's really unfortunate because, I think there shouldn't really be any distinction because everyone has their own skills and talents and abilities. And, this is a topic for another day that we will cover in quite a lot of detail because it's a very controversial topic. And I know, what it's like on both sides. And just to kind of, link and connect to what you were saying a moment ago, definitely, this thing of mutual respect is really key. I know some advice I could give to teachers is in the classroom early on, try to establish and be respectful of the different backgrounds, the different cultures, the different religions, be on a level with your students where, you're accepting of, it doesn't matter where you're from, we're equal, we're starting off at the same point, and let's build up together to, achieve our goals in English, whatever they might be. And that kind of connects with the schools that I've worked in because I've been really fortunate again to work at all levels of elementary school, middle school, high school, university. And I think it's really important to not always try to solve all of these issues immediately. If something bothers you, try to investigate why. Where's this coming from? Where's this question coming from? Why are they asking me the question like this? Try to understand a little bit about it before you react. Obviously, that's difficult sometimes, and some issues can be quite sensitive, and you might feel really embarrassed or ashamed of some things that are out of your control. That can really harm the class atmosphere. Depending on how you react. It's definitely important to keep your students on side and deal with them sensitively and deal with them in the right way. Again, it just depends on what the issue is, but definitely it can be really tricky at first trying to overcome these issues and these barriers. So definitely respect and definitely having an open mind and being able to have those discussions in the right way can definitely help. So what advice then would you give for teachers who want to work in another country or work with students from another country?
Number one, I would say learn about their culture. You can choose to work in any country you like, but first of all, accept this, that you are going to enter a new country, a new culture, and you are going to, first of all, you are going to be, you can see yourself as a guest entering somebody else's home. And of course, you want to see that you're welcomed, but also you have to be welcoming, especially as a teacher. You have to be welcoming to anything that comes your way, the new culture, the challenges. I would say even like the struggles that you might face. You have to be welcoming, but you have to also be adaptive and also determined in order to make the best decisions. So if that new culture creates a barrier to learning, when you are teaching, you're working, so in your classroom, these differences you see that are creating a barrier to the students' learning, you can work together with the students and show them how they can change it and improve it. So, for example, something that I experienced in Turkey was that because of the background that the students come from, and especially the way and the style of studying that they have at universities, when they come to the English class, they kind of expect everything to be happening from the teacher's side, for example. And their background kind of, makes them expect a lot, which they have every right for, but also they kind of miss on some points that should happen on their end. So for me, this was a little bit, for example, some issues that I had with my students doing homework. They were not used to doing homework. They were not used to practicing at home. And it was so natural for them to come to the class not doing anything and not doing any homework. It was so natural for them, and it was not natural for me at all. So I try to find this balance with my students, without being disrespectful to their beliefs or to their learning style. Try to show them what the benefit in doing homework is, and why they should be doing it, and why they should consider a lot of different things. So this is really important for teachers to consider.
I couldn't agree more with that notion that, showing students why are we doing this? What's the reason? What's the purpose? I think if you can show those students, what the goal is, what the end, what you're going to achieve at the end, I think that can really help to overcome those barriers, because your role is, to help students to achieve their goals. And if you're doing that in the right way and showing them how you're going to help them, I think that can definitely relieve a lot of those cultural problems. As well, what you said earlier about, if you're working with students from other countries, or you're working in another country, thinking as yourself as a guest, I think is a really good approach to have, because if you have that open mind, you're going to be more flexible, you're going to be more open to learning new things, trying new things, and understanding. And that maybe comes into language a little bit. I know when I worked in Korea, it was difficult for the first few months to communicate. But once I learned a few basic words in Korean, students were really impressed, and they felt more comfortable, and those cultural barriers started to kind of subside and get a little bit easier as well. So definitely that's important for sure. All right, welcome to the next part of today's podcast. This is the interview portion of the podcast, and today we're joined by our guest Euc, who's going to talk to us a little bit about his background and his experiences of teaching English and ESL around the world.
Okay, I would like to welcome you, Euc, to our show. Thank you for joining us. First of all, let's ask you about your background and your upbringing as a Haitian American living in a white middle-class suburb of New York City. How was it?
So first of all, thanks for inviting me to this podcast. It's a real pleasure to be able to talk about my expertise and background with you guys today, and to all your listeners. So regarding your first question, growing up as a first-generation Haitian American in basically an all-white neighborhood in New York. So there are definitely a lot of struggles, but also a lot of advantages that I think I had compared to other immigrants living in America. So let me talk about some of the good things. So first, let me tell you about my parents. They immigrated from Haiti to the United States in the early 80s. And one of the good things about their immigration story is that they were able to move near my cousins and my aunts. So we weren't alone growing up. I had my cousins living just 5 minutes away. We had the Haitian church community, which was just a few minutes away from where I lived. So I was never too far removed from my culture. So that was a really good thing, is I wasn't alone. Some tough things was, definitely being in school and being one of the only Black kids in the class. Sometimes it would be a little awkward, particularly talking about some topics in American history, the civil rights movement and slavery. Sometimes I would see some wandering eyes looking at me for my reaction. I would just sort of, put my head down and not really want to contribute. And I think most children, they just want to blend in. So I didn't really have that option as a kid. I always stood out. And being quite a shy, introverted person, it was kind of tough for me to just stand out just for the way that I looked. But having, my friends and my family, and particularly the Haitian church community, always within, my area, within my neighborhood, it definitely helped me adapt to just being different in school. So that was, that's pretty much it.
Wow. It's really interesting, and again, so diverse and so different to what many of us have experienced. So you obviously, we met in Korea a long time ago now, it seems. So why initially did you go into teaching? Why did you choose this as a career, and why did you choose Korea as a country to teach in?
Well, in regards to teaching, I feel like that was maybe predestined. So I come from a long line of teachers in my family. So my grandmother was a teacher. I have a lot of, cousins, aunts, uncles that were all involved in education. My father was a teacher. So just growing up, I was always surrounded by academia and education. So I guess I was always, for lack of a better word, a nerd. So I always loved reading. I loved studying. I loved history growing up. So I feel like teaching was something that I was always destined to do. In regards to why I chose Korea, well, I'll take it back a little bit to university. So when I was a junior in college, I studied abroad in Italy for 6 months. And that was my first time actually living abroad. And I absolutely fell in love with it. And I realized that when I graduated from college, I wanted to go abroad again. So when I graduated, I did a quick Google search about best places to teach, and Korea kept popping up in all my searches. So I thought, you know what, maybe I'll give Korea a chance. And 10 years later, I guess it was the right decision. So I'm happy being there.
That's excellent. I hear that you're still working in Korea, right?
I am. Yeah, it's been a decade, which for me, I can't believe that it's been 10 years. It's like the time has really flown by, but I'm still here. And I just really love the work-life balance that I have. Being a university professor, I just teach a maximum of 16 hours per week. So I have a lot of time to devote towards my hobbies. My hobbies being, number one, reading. I'm just the biggest bookworm. I try to read a book every week. And also soccer. I love to be active, so I have time to do things that I love besides teaching. And the biggest reason by far are my students. I just have a deep love for my students that I can't even put into words. Every time I walk into the classroom, and we just have a really good rapport. So that's the biggest thing keeping me in the country, is just the relationship I have with my students. And also the country itself, Korea. I know Dan, lived there for a few years, but Golnaz, I don't know about you if you've ever been to Korea, but it really is just a stunningly beautiful country, especially in the countryside. And I love to, visit the small little towns and the cities when I get a chance on the weekend. So there's a lot of things keeping me here, and I'm very glad to still be in this country.
I bet that's a one of a kind experience.
Yeah,
I hope I can visit there sometime. in the future.
Absolutely. I definitely suggest that to a lot of people if they have the opportunity to visit there for sure. Okay, thank you so much for sharing. A lot of things even I didn't know about you, which I thought I did. So that's great. So let's move it on to some more specific issues and questions regarding our topic today, which is overcoming cultural problems, issues, challenges. So, obviously, as we mentioned, you had quite a different upbringing or different background to a lot of us. So what were some of the cultural issues you faced during your career so far?
I think one of the first things that stood out to me when I came to Korea is kind of fascinating. Number one, I wasn't really, in America, I'm always cognizant of the fact that I'm African American, I'm Black. But when I was in Korea, I realized that I'm American first, and my Blackness was not really that important when it came to my career. So that was kind of fascinating. I was like, oh, yeah, it's not like a barrier, that big of a barrier when it comes to teaching in itself. But when I first came to Korea, definitely the staring in public was a really big eye-opener. Everywhere I went, this was about 10 years ago, so there weren't too many people that looked like me that were working in Korea. So definitely the stares on the subway, curious looks. But I didn't really know Korean that well at the time, so maybe they were saying some comments, but maybe it was a blessing in disguise that I didn't know what they were saying. But that was kind of a tough thing just for everyday life in the first few years living here. When it comes to teaching specifically, I'm a very organized, sort of regimented person. I schedule, my life hour by hour. I'm very detailed oriented. So in Korea, I had to learn how to let go a bit, because in Korea, specifically in the education sector, they like to throw a lot of things at you sort of last minute meetings, last minute curriculum changes. Sometimes they would even change the textbook just a few weeks before the semester started. So that was really tough for me, someone who likes to plan weeks and months ahead. So I had to learn how to sort of let go as a teacher and to just trust that everything will be okay, and to trust my skills as a teacher that I can adapt. So those are a few things I had to get used to.
The art of letting go, as you mentioned, is, I think, a key in resolving many different issues. But I want to ask you, did you ever face any specific cultural barriers that impacted your teaching, maybe positively or negatively? And what was the effect there?
So I think besides the things that I mentioned, the last minute sort of things being pushed onto me, I had a few instances where maybe some questions were asked to me during the class that I'm like, oh, okay, I was not expecting that. And that was a bit, kind of over my head. There was, let me try to think of how can I explain the situation. So there was one time in class where there's one student in particular that was just staring at me during the entire lesson, and it was really uncomfortable. And I don't know whether or not it was because I was saying something wrong, or maybe the lesson was not, I don't know what was going on. So after class, I just pulled the student aside and asked her, I noticed that you're looking at me during the lesson. Is there anything that you wanted to ask? And she was like, oh, I'm so sorry. I didn't realize I was staring at you, but I was just looking at your hand. And I was like, okay, what about my hand? And she's like, it was really strange. I'm like, what's going on? And she's like, I noticed that one side of your hand is lighter than the other side. And I just never saw that before. And I'm just kind of curious. And I said, Black people, for some, we have a lighter shade on our hand. And it was really random, but I just realized that there are some things that I just take for granted that other people that don't look like me, it's really fascinating. And then I realized at that time that I guess I have to be somewhat of an ambassador for all Black people when I don't even intend to be, because I'll get some questions that for me just sound so naive and very random. But for other people who want to know more about me, I guess I'll have to take the mantle and answer. That was a really fascinating time for me. And it's kind of funny to look back on now, but I'm glad that I took it in stride and just answered the question verbatim,
It's a good approach to have, I think, because some people might not take that quite as graciously as you did. So
Exactly.
handled well by the sounds of it. So moving it on a little bit back to teaching specifically, is there anything we can do as teachers to kind of overcome these cultural barriers? Avoid them, limit them. What are some of the the common trends or the common themes that come to mind when trying to tackle and limit these issues in the classroom and maybe outside of the classroom as well?
That's a good question. I think regarding cultural barriers, I think just keeping the dialogue consistently open and not judgmental. That's really big because I realized, being in Korea and being someone of color, I've always been a minority, even in the United States, but even more so in Korea. So even though I just want to be a teacher, I also recognize that I have responsibility as a man of color to represent my race. So when I do get questions, for example, about my hand or about my hair or am I a good dancer, kind of things that are just, very stereotypical, the initial reaction is to like roll my eyes. But I realize that these conversations, most of the time, these questions come out of curiosity. So I think keeping the dialogue open and trying to answer them and just to, try to be an ambassador and to not judge people for trying to know more about other races and other cultures is really important as a teacher.
That's really interesting, and I personally hope that we can see better changes in the whole world regarding this topic. And I myself think that this is our responsibility as individuals to just move forward and try to learn to see people for who they are and the potential they have, and just put the stereotypes and the old beliefs away. Now, I want to ask you about your advice for new teachers, because, the people who want to start this career, the teaching career for the first time, they have their own struggles. But also, let's think about the people who want to start teaching for the first time, who come from non-white backgrounds or different religions, or other groups that might not feel 100% confident like other teachers in the community. So what is your advice for them? What kind of mindset do you suggest having for them, or anything that can inspire them, make them feel more confident in taking steps into this career?
Well, that's a really great question. And I'm going to tailor my answer specifically for Korea. So Korea is one of the most homogenous countries on earth. I think it's 99% ethnic Korean population. So when you come from a different country, specifically into Korea, you are really in the minority, even more so for people of color. So if a person of color wants to come teach in a country like Korea, I have a few pieces of advice. So number one is to really try to either find or create a community with people of similar backgrounds. And luckily in Korea, we have a really strong and vibrant community of Black and Latino teachers and students and all walks of life. There's a Facebook group called the Brothers and Sisters of Korea, and it's really active. We ask each other questions that we can't find anywhere else, like where to get a haircut, or we're having a struggle with a co-teacher that's saying things that are quite insensitive, or any type of issue that is specific to our background. We're able to talk about it, and we problem solve and work together. So that's definitely one thing. So create a community with people of a similar background, but also try to find and create a community of things that you just enjoy that are not specifically related to your background. So like I mentioned, I love reading, and I realized that there was a big void when it came to book clubs in my city. So I created a book club. So every month we choose a book and we discuss it, and we choose books about various topics. And that really feeds my soul in a way. It makes me really comfortable. When you find a community that supports things that you love and enjoy, it makes living abroad much more easier. Sometimes you forget that you're living abroad. It really feels like home. And I can say that Korea definitely feels like home because I have the community of other Black and Latino teachers, and also because I have communities of things that I enjoy doing on a daily basis. So I recommend those two things for sure. And also keeping an open mind.
Exactly. Wonderful. Thanks for sharing, Yuke. Definitely a lot of similar things that I heard, when I was living there as well. And again, building that community is really important for supporting each other and, overcoming these issues positively. So great. So just one final question, just to kind of wrap up everything today. Obviously, your partner, your wife, Dawn, again, comes from a very different background, a very unique upbringing as well. So would you be able to tell me a little bit about what she does in terms of helping others and helping people from other backgrounds to overcome their challenges and, the cultural issues that they face as well?
Right. So my wife definitely had some issues being a woman here in Korea, especially an expat woman. So my wife, she had some health issues when she first came into the country. She had some difficulty adjusting to the different diet that they have. In Korea, they eat a lot of fermented food, a lot of spicy food, a lot of rice, and she was not used to eating those things. So she developed, some health issues. So she went to various doctors and explained, I'm having some pain and some discomfort. I'm having these symptoms. I don't know where they're coming from. And she started to become really frustrated because a lot of the doctors would sort of dismiss her by saying, oh, it's because you're getting older. It's because you're a woman. You just sort of have to deal with it. These things are normal for women. So she was just getting dismissed left and right, and just constantly. And I'd be there with her, and it's really frustrating to hear, these dismissive answers. So what she ended up doing is he tried to do a lot of self-study regarding nutrition, trying to figure out what are the underlying causes and the roots of her health problems. And in doing so, she ended up joining a nutritional therapy practitioner. She joined a program where she became certified. So after she finished that program, she started a business where she helps women overcome the same issues that she had regarding health in Korea. So I think overcoming that first initial frustration of being dismissed because of, number one, being female, and maybe number two, being an expat, she harnessed that frustration to something really positive that's benefiting a lot of expat women in the country.
Yeah, that's awesome. And sorry, Golnaz, go ahead.
It's okay.
Okay.
I'm going to start. That's awesome to hear. And for me as a woman, and for a non-native teacher, as an Iranian woman, to hear that story, I'm already inspired, and I think it's something to take pride in. That being dismissed, being ignored, is not going to stop you. You can just use it to your own benefit, and also to help people benefit from it.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think, we asked you earlier why you're still there, and it's pretty clear because you've managed to build that community. Both of you are kind of making positive changes and not just helping yourselves and improving yourselves, but also improving the lives of others. And I think the fact that you've overcome all of these issues and challenges and potential problems that a lot of people might just give up on or just accept, you've said, you know what, we're here for a long time. We're going to make a positive change. And it's really inspiring to hear that, and hopefully our listeners can take some, what's the word I'm looking for? Okay, I'm gonna have to try this again. They can take some encouragement in the fact that they can also follow, some of the advice that we've mentioned, and hopefully not just apply it to their teaching, but also maybe living and working in another country or working with students from different backgrounds, because when there's opportunities that come up where students ask these questions, or they might say something that might seem insensitive or, sexist or racist, helping us to understand a little bit where that comes from and having a little bit of patience and tolerance can actually go a long way and help to overcome these challenges, not only in the classroom, but also outside as well. So thank you so much for joining us today, Yuke. It was a real pleasure. And I'm sure, hopefully, we'll be hearing from you again in the future. But yeah, thank you so much for joining us. It was a pleasure.
Thanks so much. It was a great pleasure.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for listening. We hope that you enjoyed it. And we want to know about your feedback, your questions, about your experience with cultural issues. If you have had any, feel free to email us at esltalkpodcast@gmail.com. And don't forget to follow us on Instagram and also like us on Facebook.
Thank you guys for listening. We hope to see you soon. And again, as Golnaz said, any feedback is greatly appreciated, and we'll be happy to answer your questions in future podcasts. Thank you so much for listening, guys. We'll see you next week. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye, guys.
Thank you for listening. Don't forget to subscribe for new episodes and to follow us on Instagram and Facebook for even more ESL teaching content.